So as we found out this week, Tormenta FC, South Georgia Tormenta FC, officially is shutting down operations. Well, not really. They're going on hiatus. But if you know anything about anything in U.S. soccer, that basically means it's a death sentence. And I've read everything that I could, and I just have so many thoughts in my mind. I think mostly it's just sadness, first and foremost. Sadness for the players, really, first of all, that basically not even 2 weeks before the season starts and they're out of a job and basically having to scramble to find their way onto another roster when, at least in USL League One, roster spots are filled already for the most part, and it's going to be really tough to get onto one of those rosters or even a USL Championship roster or even like a MLS or MLS Next Pro side. So, and of course, I think this gives plenty of ammunition for the players' union in the USL, and I think they should, I'm all in on their side. Right, and I hope that they get recompense or some kind of guarantees to prevent this kind of shutdown, which you think this close to the start of the season that the league would have intervened and covered or at least offered some kind of loan to cover that insurance to at least get them through that season. I mean, at least with teams like North Carolina FC, at least, they made it clear that they were going to go on hiatus at the end, towards the end of the season. So, however, I think another thing, and probably the thing I'm most sad for, is the community and the culture and the vibes, really, that surround Tormenta FC. And if you don't know, they're in a small-ish town called Statesboro, Georgia. If you're a college football fan, you're probably familiar with that. That's the home of Georgia Southern University. That's where I went to school. And I still live in the South Georgia region, and there was nothing really like Tormenta FC. It was a place where, people could, hang out on a weekend while school was still in session, give them and have, a cheap activity to, hang out for the day and see some soccer in a very central location. And I mean, I was there when they played their first League One game. I was there with a couple of friends having to dodge some soccer balls behind the net in the section with the beak guy, if you know that, who bangs the drum and had his face painted like a ibis bird. And I got a scarf from that match. I still have it, and it's prominently in my apartment. So, and obviously the 2022 USL League One Championship, I remember being there for both of their home playoff games, and what a feeling that was when they won it, right in front of the home crowd in Statesboro, continuing the, championship tradition of Statesboro sports excellence with, Georgia Southern and their 6 Division I AA national titles, and Tormenta, who had success in their previous league. I think the NPDL, I think it was called. And then, continuing that success. And again, there's nothing really like Tormenta, because in South Georgia, it's high school and college football all the time. I mean, really, not only that, but Tormenta was in the middle of a basically soccer desert. Sure, we had Savannah Clovers, but that's still an hour away, and even then, they only lasted, I think, 1 year in Nissa, and they were plagued by the same problems, money, and they shut down, and I don't know what their future looks like. They weren't a part of that little Nissa Challenge Cup or whatever they did, and, Nissa, that's a whole other kettle of fish, but I think it just goes to show, that soccer in the U.S., we like to think that, we're on the up and that, we can be like England or Scotland or or those European countries that is so ingrained in them. And, for every, Vermont Green FC, which I read about, or Chattanooga FC that have, survived and carved out a little niche for themselves, there's a bunch more clubs like Tormenta, like North Carolina, like Oklahoma City, which you want to talk about a failure of U.S. soccer. I mean, Oklahoma City, that should be a thriving market, and they haven't had a team there since probably pandemic days. And I know that there will be some who scoff and say, oh, it was never meant to work in Statesboro, or say something like that. Probably mainly bitter Chattanooga or Charlotte fans, but in the end, Statesboro is very much comparable to a village football club in like England, where you have Chester or Ross County in Scotland. I think you could make the comparison. Best comparison probably would be to Ibar, which they had a couple seasons in the top flight of La Liga, and that was a huge deal for that community. And Statesboro, I think it's a bit larger than Ibar, but their populations are very comparable. So for soccer to be ingrained and to really work and make it as a major sport, places like Statesboro have to work. And this could, get into the topic of, USL League One and the turnover there. Obviously, even MLS has had clubs fold. I mean, if you go back to the early days, Tampa Bay Fusion and Tampa Bay Mutiny and Miami Fusion, they folded in 2001, and that league was in trouble for a while, but things have gotten much better there, although Tampa Bay is probably never getting a club of an MLS. Not with Orlando City there, which that's a topic for another day, but basically, we've seen clubs come and go in USL and USL League One, and, there's talk that, this one magic bullet solution, and I see this from MLS even into USL, like ProRel or aligning the calendar is going to be the magic solution that fixes all these problems. And at the end of the day, you clearly drank Kool-Aid if you think that's the case, because, even if, say, Tormenta FC made it to the championship, sure, their pot of money for being in the championship might be bigger, but so are their player costs, insurance costs, and they probably would have been one up, one down, knowing how 2023 went for Tormenta. And I think they'd, still be in the same predicament that we are now. And obviously there's many others that have had similar predicaments. North Carolina, Oklahoma City, RGV, Northern Colorado, Central Valley Fuego is out in California. And this isn't to say, soccer is doomed in the U.S., because I think it can still work, and that it could still work in places like Statesboro. It just takes time. It takes the right investment and the league that's willing to, be willing to do the right thing. And I think with Tormenta, and I don't know the owners that well, but it seemed like they were in it for the right reasons, and it sounds like, at least from what I've heard from people I know in Statesboro, that kind of their business portfolio hasn't done so well in the past couple of years, really, ever since they won the championship. And so who's to say? But this still back to what I was mentioning earlier. If Tormenta was a blip in or an oasis in the desert, it's just now a full-on desert, because really you look at the landscape of U.S. soccer, particularly in Georgia, it's basically all surrounded around Atlanta. And, the last rumors that I've heard about, USL Championship or USL 1 clubs going in Georgia, it's, Athens, Roswell, Atlanta suburb areas. And even if you look at, NPSL and USL 2, most of those clubs are in the northern half of the state and kind of in surrounding Atlanta, which, I mean, that's obviously the population draw, but But you think, if hockey could work in a lot of places in these smaller metro areas in Georgia, like Macon, Savannah, Augusta's getting a team, Columbus, and Athens, that certainly there's a place for soccer in Georgia. And so when you look at the closest pro teams to States Pro now, it's 2 hours to, Charleston, which I know not many Tormenta fans would likely to pick up Charleston because there's been, history in the U.S. Open Cup. They've kind of been the big bully, if you will, or Jacksonville in their first year club in the USL League One or USL Championship. And who's to say, they don't fall to a similar fate. And, when you talk about soccer in Jacksonville Armada seem to be going through a lot of the similar issues. But I hope that, someday that this can come back. I don't know if Tormenta can come back to the way they were. I think this has squandered a lot of goodwill, and I think players are going to be hesitant to sign up for a potential comeback because of this. And this is also affecting the women's team, so that's also another kettle of fish. But whether it's, NPSL, USL2, even MLS Next Pro, which I'm not crazy about, even though as they're mostly an MLS development league, despite, the couple of independent teams there are, I think that's still a tough reputation to shake, as long as it's majority MLS development sides. But I think that Savannah does have a place somewhere in the U.S. soccer pyramid, and I think it's just going to take time and a lot of commitment to getting it done. And whether that's Savannah, whether that's, something down towards Brunswick, maybe a return in Statesboro. I'm hopeful that someday it can happen, and hopefully soon. So, yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts and expressing my sadness about the apparent death of South Georgia Tormenta FC. And if you've made it this long, thanks for listening to my rambling. I don't care if it's, 10 of you or 3 of you. I just wanted to let my thoughts be known. So thank you very much.